The first time I saw my mother smile again, it wasn't because of me. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of quiet weekday that smells faintly of furniture polish and old paper. I was standing in the hallway outside her sitting room, my phone buzzing in my palm with unanswered emails, when I heard it soft, breathy, unmistakable. A laugh. Not loud, not full, but real. I froze. For years, my mother's world had been a landscape of stillness. Silence wasn't just the absence of sound for her, it was the way time moved now. Slow, careful, contained. Iris Dawson had been deaf since her late 30s, wheelchair-bound since a stroke stole half her body's obedience. By the time I inherited the house and the responsibility of her care, her laughter had become something I remembered, not something I expected. And yet, there it was. I pushed the door open just a crack. Hazel was kneeling in front of my mother's wheelchair, her small hands moving through the air with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. She couldn't have been more than 6 skinny arms, hair tied back in a crooked ponytail, knees smudged with the kind of dirt children never notice. My mother's eyes were locked on her, bright and focused in a way I hadn't seen in years. Iris's fingers trembled as she signed back, slowly, carefully, like she was relearning a forgotten language. Hazel grinned, wide and proud, like she'd just unlocked a secret door. I stood there longer than I should have, long enough to feel something unfamiliar press against my ribs. Shame. Before Hazel arrived, my life had been predictable, in the way expensive watches tick precise, polished, and emotionally distant. I liked it that way. I ran Dawson and Pierce investments with the same discipline I applied to everything else. Measured risks, clean decisions, no room for mess. Emotions were messy. Family even more so. The house had once been my parents' pride. A wide, old place with tall windows and hardwood floors that creaked under memory. After my father died, and my mother's health declined, it became a responsibility, something I maintained, not something I lived in. I moved into the guest wing. My sister Penelope lived across the city, busy with her own carefully curated life, visiting when obligation demanded. Caregivers came and went. Good ones, mostly. Professional. Polite. They fed my mother, bathed her, changed her linens, and spoke to her slowly, loudly, as if volume could bridge silence. I signed with her when I remembered, which wasn't often enough. Then Isla Reed answered the job listing. She arrived on a gray Monday morning with a single suitcase and a little girl holding her hand. Isla had tired eyes but a calm presence, the kind that made rooms feel steadier just by standing in them. Hazel stayed close to her, peeking out from behind her coat like a cautious bird. I didn't realize the position included housing, Isla said, glancing around the entryway, her voice careful. It does, I replied. The East Wing. Private entrance. You'll have your own space. Hazel's eyes followed the light as it moved across the floor. She didn't speak. At first, I thought she was shy. Isla explained later that Hazel didn't talk much around new people. She said it apologetically, like it was something she needed to justify. She's just observant, Isla added, squeezing her daughter's hand. I nodded, already mentally filing them into the background of my life. The weeks settled into a rhythm. Isla was efficient without being cold, attentive without hovering. My mother seemed calmer under her care, her routines smoother. Hazel wandered the house quietly, always respectful, always watching. She spent afternoons in the old sitting room with my mother, drawing at the small table by the window while Iris read large print books or stared out at the garden. I didn't think much of it. That was my mistake. The first clue that something had shifted came one evening when I passed the sitting room and noticed my mother's knitting basket overturned. Yarn spilled across the rug like a careless thought. Iris was smiling, actually smiling as Hazel tugged gently at a strand of blue wool, miming a fish swimming through water. My mother's hands moved, slow but deliberate. Fish? She signed. Hazel clapped, silent but ecstatic. I stood there, unseen, my heart thudding in a way that had nothing to do with surprise. Later that night, I asked Isla about it. Hazel's been learning signs, she said, stirring soup on the stove, from an old book she found in the library. She asked if it was okay. I frowned. She's 6. She's curious, Isla replied simply. I let it go. I always let things go. Penelope noticed before I did. She always did. She'd inherited our mother's sensitivity, though she masked it behind sharp opinions, and a voice that could cut glass. She seems animated, Penelope said during one of her Sunday visits, watching Hazel help Iris arrange flowers. Iris is well cared for, I said. Isn't that what matters? Penelope's lips thinned. Care isn't the same as connection, Leo. I didn't respond, because the truth was, I didn't know how to give my mother what that child seemed to offer so effortlessly. And some part of me, small, bitter, and afraid, resented it. By the time I realized Hazel wasn't just entertaining my mother, but waking something inside her, it was already too late to pretend nothing was happening. That Tuesday afternoon, watching them sign back and forth, I felt like an intruder in my own home. Hazel glanced up and spotted me, her smile faltering. She waved, then quickly turned back to my mother, signing something with exaggerated care. Iris looked at me, her eyes soft but searching. She signed one word. Listen. I didn't know how. Not yet. I told myself it was harmless. That's what I always did when something unsettled me. I shrank it down until it fit neatly into a rational explanation. Hazel was a child. Children were affectionate. My mother was lonely. Of course she'd respond to attention. There was nothing more to it than that, except there was. The house began to change in small, inconvenient ways. Iris asked through notes, through halting signs for the sitting room curtains to be opened more often. She wanted her meals at the table instead of on the tray by her wheelchair. Once, when I signed, "Are you tired?" she shook her head firmly and pointed toward the window where Hazel was chalking flowers onto the stone path outside. "I want to watch," she signed. Watching. It struck me then how long it had been since I'd truly watched my mother, since I'd noticed what her eyes lingered on. What made her lean forward instead of sink back. I'd been so focused on preserving her health that I'd forgotten about her spirit. Hazel, it seemed, had not. Most afternoons, when I came home early, which was rare, I found them together. Hazel would sit cross-legged on the rug, an open book spread between them. Not a children's book. The old sign language manual she'd found. Its pages yellowed and annotated in my mother's careful handwriting from years ago. Hazel traced the pictures with her finger, copying the shapes with intense concentration. Iris corrected her gently, tapping her wrist or adjusting her fingers. Sometimes Hazel got it wrong and pouted, her brows knitting together in frustration. Iris would laugh silent, but unmistakable in sign. It's okay. Those moments made something twist inside me. Not anger. Something worse. Regret. I started noticing things I'd ignored for years. How my mother's hands shook less when Hazel was around. How she slept better. How the lines around her eyes softened, as if she were remembering who she used to be before illness taught her restraint. And still, I kept my distance. Penelope, on the other hand, did not. One evening, she pulled me aside into the kitchen, her voice low but sharp. "Have you thought about boundaries? With a 6-year-old? I asked. "With an employee's child," she snapped. "Leo, this isn't appropriate. Hazel's not trained. She's not a therapist. What happens when they leave?" I hesitated. "Isla's been here nearly 3 months. That's nothing," Penelope said. "And you know Mother doesn't handle change well." She was right. That was the cruel part. My mother clung to routine because routine didn't abandon you. People did. I tried to convince myself Penelope's concern was practical, not jealous. But when she watched Hazel sign with Iris, her jaw tightened in a way that felt personal. The tension reached its first breaking point on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I came home early, the kind of early that feels like a mistake, and heard raised voices echoing down the hall. Penelope's heels clicked sharply against the wood floor. "You can't let her depend on a child," Penelope was saying. "It's irresponsible." Hazel stood frozen near the door, her hands clutched together, eyes wide. Iris sat rigid in her wheelchair, her face pale, her hands moving fast and angry. "She helps me," my mother signed. "She sees me." Penelope threw her hands up. "You're romanticizing this, Mother. Hazel doesn't understand what she's doing." Hazel's lip trembled. That was when I stepped in. "That's enough," I said, my voice louder than I intended. Everyone turned toward me. Hazel flinched as if I'd shouted directly at her. Penelope looked relieved. "Good. Tell them." I looked at Hazel, really looked at her. The fear in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was loss. The kind children feel when something precious is about to be taken away without explanation. "Hazel," I said carefully, lowering myself to her level, "why don't you go find your mother?" She hesitated, glancing at Iris. My mother reached out, grasping Hazel's small hand. She signed slowly, deliberately. "Thank you." Hazel nodded, swallowing hard, and ran down the hall. The door closed behind her with a soft finality. Iris looked at me, betrayal flickering across her face. She signed one word that felt heavier than any accusation. "Why?" I didn't have an answer. That night, the house felt emptier than it had in years. I lay awake listening to the rain hit the windows, the silence pressing in on me like a judgment. I replayed the scene over and over, Hazel's frightened eyes, my mother's trembling hands. I told myself I was protecting them. Protecting my mother from disappointment. Protecting Hazel from attachment. But the truth was uglier. I was protecting myself from the reminder of how absent I'd been. The discovery came a week later, quietly, the way truths often do when they no longer need to shout. I found the journal by accident. It was tucked behind a row of old photo albums in the library, its spine cracked, its pages filled with my mother's looping handwriting. I recognized it immediately. She used to journal religiously after she lost her hearing. I sat down without thinking and opened it. The entries were sparse at first. Observations about the weather, notes about physical therapy. Then, gradually, names appeared. Hazel taught me a new sign today. Butterfly. Hazel listens with her eyes. I forgot what it felt like to be needed. My throat tightened. Then came the entry that undid me completely. My children love me, I know, but they are busy loving the world. Hazel loves me where I am. I closed the journal and pressed my palm against the page, as if I could hold the words still. I'd failed her. Not through cruelty or neglect, but through distance. Through the belief that providing comfort was enough. Down the hall, I heard laughter again. Soft. Careful. Alive. This time, I didn't stay hidden. I didn't confront anyone right away. That surprised me most of all. Old habits urged me toward control, to step in, set rules, restore order. Instead, I found myself lingering at doorways, pausing at the top of the stairs, watching from a distance like someone studying a language he'd never been taught but suddenly needed to learn. Hazel returned to my mother's side cautiously after that argument, as if testing whether the ground was still safe beneath her feet. Isla never pushed. She kept Hazel close those first few days, redirecting her gently when she drifted toward the sitting room. My mother noticed immediately. She asked for Hazel with her eyes. When Isla finally let her go, it was with a warning whispered into her daughter's ear and a careful look in my direction. Hazel nodded solemnly and walked into the sitting room like someone entering a sacred space. I watched as Iris lifted her hand, not shaky this time, but steady, and signed something slow and deliberate. You came back? Hazel's face lit up. I felt something crack. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone in the library, staring at the sign language book Hazel had found. Its cover was faded, the title barely legible. I opened it to the first page and tried to copy the illustration, thumb tucked, fingers curved just so. My hand felt clumsy. Wrong. I tried again. The silence around me wasn't peaceful. It was accusing. I thought about all the times my mother had tried to teach me to sign after she lost her hearing. How impatient I'd been. How I'd told myself she'd understand my busy schedule, my exhaustion, my limitations. I'll learn later. I'd promised. Later, it turned out, was a moving target. The first time I tried to sign to her again, really sign, was the next morning. She was at the table, Isla helping her with breakfast. Hazel sat beside her, swinging her legs under the chair, signing animatedly about a dream she'd had. I cleared my throat, a useless habit, and raised my hands. My mother turned toward me, surprise flickering across her face. I signed slowly, carefully, the words stiff on my fingers. Good morning. Hazel stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening. My mother stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, her mouth curved into a smile that was equal parts joy and sorrow. She signed back. Again. I tried. I stumbled. Hazel giggled, clapping her hands silently. Like this, she whispered, adjusting my fingers with gentle authority. I let her. Penelope arrived later that day, her mood sharp as ever. She noticed the sign book on the table, my awkward attempts at conversation, the way Iris's eyes followed me now with a new kind of hope. This is temporary, she warned me in the kitchen. You're letting a child rewrite boundaries you should have set years ago. I leaned against the counter, suddenly tired. Or maybe I'm fixing something I broke. She scoffed. You're projecting. Hazel won't stay forever. No, I said quietly. But the damage will. The real confrontation came that weekend. Penelope brought up the subject of Isla's employment during lunch, her tone casual but calculated. I've been reviewing the household expenses, she said. We're paying for accommodations that were never part of the original agreement. Isla froze, her fork hovering over her plate. Hazel looked between us, confused. I don't want to cause trouble, Isla said quickly. If this arrangement isn't working... It is, my mother signed sharply, her movements sudden and fierce. She stays. Penelope sighed. Mother, you can't decide these things based on emotion. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. She's not deciding based on emotion, I said. She's deciding based on connection. Penelope's eyes narrowed. Since when did you become so sentimental? Since I realized sentimentality is another word for caring. The table fell silent. Later that evening, Penelope confronted me alone in my study. You're risking everything, she said. Your work? Your routine? Your sanity for what? A temporary comfort? I looked at the old family photos lining the shelves. My mother laughing, my father's arm around her shoulders. A version of our family that had known how to touch. I've already lost everything that mattered, I said. I just didn't notice. Penelope left early the next morning. The house felt steadier without her sharp edges. Weeks passed. The change in my mother was undeniable. She grew stronger, not physically, but in presence. She demanded more from her days. She laughed more. She argued with Hazel in exaggerated signs, their mock disputes ending in silent fits of laughter. I practiced every night. My hands sore, my patience tested. Hazel became my unexpected teacher, correcting me with earnest seriousness. No, like this, she'd whisper, guiding my fingers. You have to mean it. One afternoon, I came home to find Hazel sitting alone in the sitting room, her sign book closed in her lap. Where's Mom? I asked. She's resting. Hazel signed slowly. She looked up at me. Your mom's tired. Something in her tone unsettled me. I found Iris asleep in her room, her breathing shallow, her face drawn. Panic flared, but Isla assured me it was just exhaustion. Still, I sat by her bedside long after the others had gone. When she woke, she looked at me with surprising clarity. She signed, I'm proud of you. I swallowed hard. I'm trying, I whispered, even though she couldn't hear it. She reached for my hand and squeezed. Don't stop. I didn't. The discovery of what I stood to lose came soon after, and it would demand a choice I could no longer avoid. The call came on a Monday morning, just as I was leaving for work. Penelope's name flashed on my phone, sharp and insistent. I almost ignored it. We hadn't spoken since she'd left in a quiet storm of disapproval. Her silence loud with judgment, but something in my chest tightened, an old instinct stirring. I answered. You need to come to the hospital, she said. No greeting, no softness, just the brittle edge of fear she never let anyone see. What happened? I asked, already reaching for my coat. It's Mother. The drive felt endless. Red lights blurred into one another. The city suddenly too loud, too alive for the fragile thought pressing against my ribs. I kept seeing my mother's hands, the way they moved now with purpose again. I kept hearing Hazel's silent laughter, the way it filled rooms without sound. When I reached the hospital, Penelope was pacing the waiting room, her arms folded tight across her chest. She collapsed during physical therapy, she said. They stabilized her, but her voice wavered. They're running tests. We sat in silence, the sterile smell of disinfectant stinging my nose. I watched families move in and out of rooms, carrying hope and grief in equal measure. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Hours later, the doctor finally came. It wasn't another stroke, he said gently, but her heart is weak. The stress, physical and emotional, has taken a toll. Penelope nodded briskly. What's the prognosis? She needs rest, he replied. Consistency. Calm. Consistency. The word echoed painfully. Penelope turned to me, her expression hardening as if she'd been preparing this argument since the moment she dialed my number. This is exactly what I warned you about, she said. All this stimulation, it's too much. Hazel, Isla, the changes, it's exhausting her. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again, because doubt, sharp and unwelcome, had slipped in. Was I wrong? Had I mistaken awakening for strain? Had I selfishly clung to this fragile joy without considering the cost? When I finally went in to see my mother, she looked small against the white sheets. Her eyes fluttered open when she sensed me near. I signed carefully, my hands unsteady. Are you in pain? She shook her head. I swallowed. I'm sorry. Her brow furrowed. She lifted her hand weakly and signed. For what? I hesitated, then told the truth. For pushing you. For not protecting you. Her eyes sharpened, a familiar stubbornness glinting there despite her frailty. You did not push me, she signed. You saw me. Tears blurred my vision. Penelope watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. The decision came later that night, delivered with the cold efficiency I knew too well. Penelope presented me with the folder documents, neatly arranged. I've spoken with a specialist care facility, she said. They're equipped for Mother's needs. Quiet, structured, safe. My heart dropped. You're talking about moving her. It's what's best, Penelope replied. This house, this chaos, it's not sustainable. Hazel isn't chaos. I snapped. She's a child. Penelope shot back. And Isla is an employee. You're blurring lines, Leo. You're making emotional decisions. I looked at the folder, at my sister's carefully planned solution. And what about what Mother wants? I asked. Penelope's jaw tightened. Mother doesn't always know what's best for her anymore. That was the moment. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly. in the realization that my sister was prepared to take my mother away from the one connection that had brought her back to life because it didn't fit neatly into her understanding of care. The next morning, I brought Hazel to the hospital. Penelope protested. Isla hesitated. But my mother's eyes lit up when Hazel appeared at the foot of her bed, clutching a small drawing. Hazel signed carefully, her movements slow and deliberate. "I made this for you." My mother laughed soft, breathless, and signed back. "It's beautiful." Hazel climbed onto the chair beside the bed and took my mother's hand, her small fingers wrapping around Iris's fragile ones. I watched my sister watch them. Something shifted in Penelope's expression. Not acceptance, but doubt. Later, the doctor pulled me aside. "She responds better when she's emotionally engaged," he admitted. "Her vitals stabilize. She's more alert." I exhaled slowly. "So, connection isn't harming her?" He smiled faintly. "On the contrary, that afternoon, I made my choice. I told Penelope I wouldn't move our mother. If you fight me on this," she warned, "it will get ugly." I met her gaze. "Then we'll let it." The public consequence came swiftly. Penelope escalated the matter legally, questioning my judgment, my capacity to make decisions on our mother's behalf. Old family wounds surfaced, whispered conversations among relatives, raised eyebrows at board meetings. But something remarkable happened too. People listened, doctors spoke up, caregivers testified. Even Isla, quiet, composed, shared what she'd witnessed. Hazel, unknowingly, had become the heart of a case about dignity and connection. And through it all, my mother sat beside me, her hand resting on mine, her grip steady. When the decision finally came down, it was clear. I retained full responsibility. Penelope didn't attend the final meeting. She left town soon after. Our relationship fractured but not destroyed. That night, back home, Hazel fell asleep on the couch, her head against Isla's shoulder. My mother watched them with quiet contentment. I signed to her. "I won't let them take this from you." She smiled. "You already gave it back." I realized then that love didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived with courage, with the willingness to stay. And I wasn't leaving. The weeks after the decision felt strangely calm, like the quiet after a storm when everything looks the same but carries a different weight. Penelope's absence lingered in the house. Her room remained untouched, her perfume faint in the hallway, her disapproval echoing in corners. I tried not to examine too closely. We spoke rarely, cautiously, like people stepping around cracked ice. There was no victory in what I'd done, only resolve. My mother recovered slowly. Some days were better than others. There were mornings when her hands shook too badly to sign more than a few words, and evenings when exhaustion dragged her eyelids down before dinner. But even on the hardest days, there was light. Hazel became part of the routine in a way that felt natural, not forced. She helped Isla fold laundry, read aloud in a whisper my mother couldn't hear but somehow understood, and insisted on wheeling Iris into the garden whenever the weather allowed. They'd sit there together, watching the birds, their hands occasionally brushing, exchanging small, secret signs. One afternoon, I found Hazel alone in the library again, her feet tucked under her, the old sign book open on her lap. "You're getting good," I said, sitting across from her. She nodded solemnly. "Your mom says I'm patient." "She's right." Hazel tilted her head. "You're learning too." I smiled faintly. "I'm trying." She studied me for a moment, her gaze serious in a way only children can manage. "You have to keep going. She likes it when you talk with your hands." Her words hit harder than any reprimand. It did keep going. I signed with my mother every day, sometimes about important things, her health, her comfort, her wishes. Sometimes about nothing at all. The way the tea tasted, the cat she swore she saw in the garden, though we didn't own one. Memories of my father that made her eyes soften and her smile ache. One evening, as we sat together by the window, she signed something that caught me off guard. "Do you remember when you were small?" I nodded. "You used to talk too much," she signed, amusement flickering across her face. "Then one day, you stopped." I looked down at my hands. Life got loud. I signed back. She reached for my wrist gently. "Silence is not emptiness." It felt like a forgiveness I hadn't earned. The idea of the foundation came quietly, the way most meaningful things do. I was sorting through paperwork late one night, legal documents left over from the dispute with Penelope, when I found myself staring at my mother's old advocacy notes. She'd once worked with a community center for the deaf, long before her health declined. I remembered her frustration when funding dried up, her anger when programs were cut. The next morning, I brought it up hesitantly. "What if we did something?" I asked, signing carefully. "Something in your name." She frowned slightly. "What kind of something?" "A foundation." I signed. "For connection. For families like ours." Her eyes widened. "Why?" I swallowed. "Because I waited too long." She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Then do it right. The months that followed were full, in a way my life had never been before. Meetings, planning sessions, conversations that mattered. I learned more sign language. I learned how to listen without fixing. I learned that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a bridge. Penelope returned once, briefly, to attend a family gathering. The tension between us was still there, but it had softened. I see she's happy, she said quietly, watching Hazel sign excitedly about a storybook. She is, I replied. Penelope hesitated. I was afraid of losing control, of losing her. So was I admitted. She nodded, accepting the truth without ceremony. The foundation launched on a cool autumn morning. My mother insisted on being there, wrapped in a soft shawl. Hazel perched proudly beside her. Isla stood a little apart, her eyes shining with quiet pride. I spoke briefly, not about money or programs, but about my mother, about the cost of silence, and the courage it takes to reach across it. When I finished, my mother signed something to the audience through an interpreter. Love does not need sound. It needs presence. Hazel squeezed her hand. That night, back home, as the house settled into its familiar creaks and sighs, my mother fell asleep in her chair, peaceful. Hazel had already been tucked into bed, her sign book resting on the nightstand. I sat alone for a long time, thinking about the man I'd been and the one I was still becoming. Family, I'd learned, wasn't about obligation or control. It was about choosing to stay, even when it was uncomfortable, especially then. The first winter after the foundation launched was harsher than expected. Cold crept into the house through the old window frames, settling into the bones of the place the same way age settles into people, quietly, persistently. My mother felt it most. Her joints stiffened. Her energy waned. Some mornings, she struggled to lift her hands high enough to sign more than a few words. Those mornings scared me. Not in the dramatic way fear is usually portrayed, but in the slow, creeping way that arrives when you realize time is no longer generous, that every good day feels borrowed. Hazel noticed before anyone else did. She started bringing my mother blankets without being asked. She learned which mugs kept tea warm the longest. She sat closer, leaned in more, her small body offering warmth where medicine could not. One afternoon, as snow dusted the garden outside, Hazel looked up at me and signed with careful seriousness. Your mom is getting tired. I nodded, my throat tight. I know. She hesitated, then added, that doesn't mean she's gone. The clarity in her eyes undid me. My mother's health declined in fits and starts. Nothing dramatic, no sudden collapse, just a gradual narrowing of her world. The doctors called it expected progression. I called it unfair. Penelope visited more often during that time. She no longer criticized Hazel or Isla. Instead, she hovered awkwardly, unsure where she fit in a world that had reshaped itself without her permission. One evening, she stood beside me in the hallway, watching Hazel sign a story to our mother. She trusts that child, Penelope said quietly. Yes, I replied. She trusts her heart, Penelope swallowed. I wish I'd been braver. It was the closest we'd come to reconciliation. The final conversation I had with my mother happened on a quiet morning in early spring. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, pale and gentle. The house was still. Isla had taken Hazel to the park, giving us privacy she somehow always sensed was needed. My mother gestured for me to come closer. I sat beside her bed, taking her hand. She signed slowly, each movement deliberate, precious. You changed. I shook my head. I remembered. She smiled faintly. That is enough. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been pressing against my chest for weeks. Are you afraid? She looked at me for a long time. No. She signed. I was lonely. Not anymore. Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. She reached up, brushing them away with surprising strength. Take care of them, she signed. Both of them. I nodded. I will. She fell asleep shortly after that, her breathing soft, her face peaceful. She didn't wake up. The house felt impossibly quiet in the days that followed. Not the heavy silence of absence, but the hollow quiet of a space learning how to hold grief. Hazel cried without sound, curling into Isla's side, her small hands clenched tight. She signed to me through tears. She loved me. Yes, I signed back. She did. The funeral was simple. My mother wouldn't have wanted anything else. People from the foundation came. Former colleagues, neighbors, families who had benefited from programs that now carried her name. Hazel stood beside me, holding my hand. When it was her turn, she placed a small paper butterfly on the casket. Fly, she signed. Afterward, when the house finally emptied, Isla approached me hesitantly. I know things will change now, she said. If you want us to leave, I shook my head. This is your home. She blinked, startled. Leo, family isn't always born, I said quietly. Sometimes it arrives and teaches you how to listen. She nodded, tears slipping free. Life didn't return to normal after that. It became something else. The foundation grew. The house filled with purposeful noise meetings, laughter, children learning to sign their first words. Hazel thrived, her voice emerging slowly, carefully, alongside her hands. Isla found stability she'd never known. Penelope remained at the edges, present but cautious, learning in her own way. And me? I learned to stay, to sign, even when my hands shook, to listen, even when it hurt, to choose connection over control. Some evenings, I still sit in the garden where my mother once watched birds with a little girl who refused to let silence win. I sign to the air sometimes. Thank you. Because love, I finally understood, doesn't ask for perfection. It only asks that you reach out. Sometimes, late at night, when the house has finally gone still, I catch myself listening for my mother's laughter, not with my ears, but with my memory. I think about how close I came to missing her, how easily love can be postponed in the name of responsibility, pride, or fear. I thought providing for my mother was enough. I thought showing up physically counted as presence. I was wrong. It took a 6-year-old child, armed with nothing but patience and an old library book, to teach me that connection is an action. That love isn't proven through control or efficiency, but through vulnerability, through sitting on the floor, through learning a language that humbles you, through choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Hazel didn't save my mother. She reminded her she was still here. And in doing so, she saved me too. If there's one lesson I carry forward, it's this. Silence is not the enemy. Distance is. The kind we build brick by brick, telling ourselves we'll cross it later, when life slows down. Later is not promised. If someone in your life is reaching for you awkwardly, imperfectly, quietly reach back. Even if your hands feel clumsy, even if you're afraid you've waited too long. Love doesn't require sound. It only requires courage. So I'll leave you with this question. The one I wish I'd asked myself sooner. Who in your life is waiting for you to truly see them, and what's stopping you from reaching out? If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need the reminder. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine, stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way back, please subscribe and support the channel. Sometimes, the quietest stories are the ones that change us the most.